The echo came long after the glass had shattered. At the foundation's annual gala, her puppy dog of an assistant deliberately knocked my family's sapphire brooch from my tuxedo. In front of a room full of donors and city elites, she brushed it off. "It's broken. Just an old thing. I'll get you a new one tomorrow." It was the only thing I had left of my mother. I smiled and nodded. "Fine." The next morning, the termination of contract from the Caldwell Group, along with my official statement breaking our engagement, arrived at her CEO's office simultaneously. Later, she knelt in the pouring rain outside my gates, holding a near-identical brooch she'd sourced from God knows where, crying and begging me to just look at her one more time. I opened the window, my voice colder than the storm. "A replica, Victoria. It suits you." The sound of the shattering was clean, a single, delicate tink that should have been swallowed by the plush carpets and the low hum of conversation in the grand ballroom. But it wasn't. That sound was a needle of ice, piercing the opulent bubble of clinking champagne flutes and polite laughter. In the small space around Victoria Davenport and me, a sudden, sharp silence fell. Dozens of gazes refracted through the light of the massive crystal chandeliers converged on us, a mixture of curiosity, speculation, and undisguised interest. The air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and aged wine, felt heavy and still. I looked down. There, scattered on the dark green velvet of the carpet, were the glittering remains. The unique, watery shimmer of old-world sapphires and the cold fire of diamonds. The Art Deco brooch that should have been pinned to the lapel of my tuxedo was now a handful of brilliant, jagged fragments. The stylized orchid design was fractured, its platinum setting bent and twisted. A small, European-cut diamond, once the heart of the flower, had broken free and rolled a few inches away, catching the light with a lonely, indifferent sparkle. It was gone. "Oh my God." The gasp was full of apology, yet laced with a practiced, almost childish helplessness. It was Leo Vance, Victoria's executive assistant of less than 3 months, a recent graduate from her alma mater. He was clutching his elbow, his handsome face a perfect mask of panic and distress. His wide, deer-like eyes, shimmering with unshed tears, darted to Victoria, then to me, his eyelashes fluttering dramatically. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm so sorry. I just turned, I think I tripped. I swear, I didn't mean to." His words came in a rush, a blush creeping up his neck. His eyes, however, flickered past me and locked onto Victoria's, betraying a hint of something beyond panic. The instinct of a young man who'd just made a mess, seeking refuge with his protector. I said nothing. I simply bent down, piece by piece, and collected the shards of sapphire and platinum, cupping them in my palm. Their coldness seeped into my skin, chilling me to the bone. The edges were sharp, pressing into my fingertips. Finally, I found the lone diamond and pinched it between my thumb and forefinger, placing it with the other fragments safely in the inside pocket of my jacket, close to my heart. The silence held. Everyone was watching, including Victoria, standing beside me. I could feel her eyes on me before they moved to Leo. Then she moved. She didn't look at me or the mess on the floor. Instead, she took half a step forward, subtly positioning herself between me and her assistant, a protective gesture Leo didn't actually need. She started to reach for his arm, then stopped, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together. Her gaze swept over the remnants in my hand before she spoke, her voice carrying the calm, effortless authority she reserved for public appearances. There was something else in it, too, a trace of dismissiveness. "It's all right, Leo. Don't make a scene," she said, her tone meant to soothe a startled child and, simultaneously, manage the audience. "It's just a piece of jewelry. It broke. Julian isn't the type to get upset over something so small." She finally turned to me, her expression unreadable, as if what had just shattered was nothing more than a misplaced wine glass. "I'll have someone from Harry Winston or Cartier call you tomorrow. We'll get you a new one. What style do you like?" She even offered a slight curve of her lips, an attempt to frame it as a joke, a casual promise between lovers. The ludicrously expensive diamond studs on her ears glittered, complementing the ruby necklace known as the Eternal Flame she'd just acquired at auction. She was stunning tonight in a crimson haute couture gown that set off her pale skin and regal posture. She was the undeniable center of this charity gala, the brilliant successor to Davenport Industries, and my fiancé, Julian Caldwell. The cold, sharp edges of the broken brooch pressed against the silk lining of my jacket. I met her gaze and nodded, even mimicking her faint smile. "Fine," I said. My voice was even, betraying nothing. Victoria seemed to freeze for a fraction of a second, perhaps taken aback by my quick agreement. But just as quickly, that flicker of surprise was replaced by an expression of condescending assurance. In her mind, this minor incident, along with my loss, had been expertly managed and dismissed. She turned away from me, raising her glass to the guests who had started murmuring amongst themselves. "A small accident," she announced with a practiced smile. "Please, everyone, enjoy the evening." The crowd's attention was redirected, and the low hum of conversation slowly returned. Music swelled once more, but the whispers spread like ripples on water. As Victoria walked away, Leo trailed half a step behind her. He shot one last glance over his shoulder at me. The panic was gone from his eyes, replaced by the triumphant, reckless gleam of a victor. He held his chin just a little higher, like a young wolf who had successfully marked his territory. I didn't watch them go. My fingertips brushed against the hard, irregular shapes in my pocket. "I'll get you a new one tomorrow." She hadn't even asked what it was. She'd probably seen it before, but never paid it any mind. Just another accessory. Compared to the glittering contents of her own jewelry vault, it was probably just an old piece, something unremarkable. It was the only thing my mother had ever truly owned for herself. It wasn't a famous antique or a designer piece. It was just a beautiful stone my grandfather had acquired in his youth, which he'd had an old artisan friend fashion into her favorite flower, an orchid. My mother had loved it, saying the deep, calming blue of the sapphire reminded her of the wildflowers in the mountain valleys near her childhood home after a spring rain. She died young, leaving my father and me very little that was truly personal. When my father handed me control of the companies, the stock portfolios, and the real estate, the last thing he gave me was a small velvet box. He said nothing, just clapped me on the shoulder. It wasn't jewelry. It was the last, warm breath of my mother's presence in this world. It was the quiet smile she wore one afternoon, sitting by a window, the light catching her fingers as she traced the cool, smooth petals. Victoria didn't know that, and perhaps she never wanted to. Our engagement, from the very beginning, was never about knowing those kinds of things. The union of the Caldwell and Davenport families was hailed by Wall Street as a merger of titans, a perfect fusion of capital and influence. She needed the Caldwells' deep-rooted stability and global logistics network to secure her company's aggressive, over-leveraged expansion. We needed Davenport Industries' disruptive energy in the tech sector and their political connections in Washington to anchor the next phase of our growth. We came from the right families, went to the right schools, and looked perfect together. We were an impeccable power couple. Love? That was an optional garnish, to be added if convenient, after all the other terms were met. We'd had pleasant enough dates, maintained a respectful distance, and never crossed each other's boundaries. I thought that was our contract. Rational, clear, stable. Until Leo Vance showed up. For years her junior, a graduate of a respectable but not top-tier university, with a resume that screamed eager but not exceptional. After becoming her assistant, he had inserted himself into her life with astonishing speed. The thoughtful late-night dinners delivered to the office, the perfectly brewed tea to sober her up after a business dinner, the coincidental lack of an umbrella on a rainy day, and those constant, adoring looks of pure, unadulterated dependency. I hadn't cared at first. Everyone has a useful, eager subordinate. But the dynamic shifted. Leo started appearing at events where he had no business being, like this gala. His attitude toward me changed from respectful deference to subtle, boundary-pushing insolence. And Victoria allowed it. The way she looked at him, with an expression of amused, indulgent fondness, was something I had never seen her direct at any other employee. Or at me. I had mentioned it once, gently. She'd brushed it off. "He's just a kid with no connections, Julian. He works hard. Don't be so sensitive." And then came tonight, the brooch shattering before her eyes, and her saying, "It's broken." Not, "What a shame." Not, How could you be so careless? Not even a sincere, I'm so sorry. Just, it's broken. Just an old piece. Just, I'll get you a new one. 4 little words, delivered with the casual indifference of a queen. They were a dull, rusty knife, twisting slowly, tearing away the paper-thin facade of civility and revealing the truth of our arrangement. They showed me exactly what I, and everything I held dear, was worth in her eyes. Our perfect match was, it turned out, a perfect mismatch. My family legacy, my deepest emotional anchor, was worth less than her assistant's calculated performance of distress, worth less than her need to smooth over an awkward moment at a party. So be it. I unclenched my fist. The part of my heart that had frozen over when the brooch hit the floor now began to thaw into a cold, calm resolve. The emotional tidal wave receded, leaving behind a sheet of ice. I turned and walked away from the center of the ballroom, heading for the terrace. The cool night air hit my face. In the distance, the lights of Manhattan spread out like a river of fallen stars. I took out my phone, the screen illuminating the darkness. Without hesitation, I dialed the first number. Mr. Peterson, it's me. The contingency plans we prepared. It's time. Yes, all of them. There's no need to disturb my father. I'll take full responsibility. I hung up and dialed a second. Davies, the dissolution of engagement agreement. The final version we discussed. I went on Victoria Davenport's desk at 9 a.m. tomorrow, along with my signed proxy statement. Yes, unilateral notification is sufficient. A third call. A fourth. My voice was steady, carried away by the wind. The instructions were clear and precise. Pulling funding, terminating partnerships, recalling our executives, freezing joint accounts. The 1,000 threads connecting the Caldwell and Davenport empires were being severed, one by one. This wasn't an impulse. The wires had been laid long ago. In our world, you never go all in. Even in engagement, the Caldwells never put all their eggs in one basket. My father knew, the board was aligned, and the mechanisms were in place. All it needed was a trigger, a justifiable reason that wouldn't paint our family as dishonorable backstabbers. Now I had one. It was personal, emotional, and perfectly suited to mask the cold, hard calculus of risk management and strategic withdrawal. A jilted fiancé, heartbroken after his bride-to-be let her boy toy destroy his mother's legacy, was a much more palatable narrative than a ruthless capitalist who saw the rot in the foundation and got out first, even if the latter was the more complete truth. Finally, I opened a social media draft. A short, formally worded statement lay waiting. It spoke of irreconcilable differences in core values and a mutual decision to part ways. I scheduled it to post at 9:05 a.m. Just enough time for Victoria to read the much colder, much more detailed legal documents first. With that done, I put the phone away. I leaned against the cold stone balustrade and lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dark. The smoke vanished into the night. In my chest, where the broken brooch lay in my pocket, I could still feel a stubborn chill. But strangely, the pain was gone. All that remained was a vast, quiet emptiness, the feeling of a decision finally made. The next day, the sun was brilliant, pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. I was signing off on a stack of urgent documents when the clock hit 9 a.m. on the dot. The red light on my intercom blinked. My assistant, Mark's, voice was as calm as ever. Mr. Caldwell, Victoria Davenport's office has called 3 times in the last 5 minutes. They say it's urgent. Also, security just reported that Ms. Davenport's car is heading this way now. I'm aware, I said, cutting the connection without looking up. At that exact moment, my personal cell vibrated on the desk. The name Victoria Davenport flashed across the screen. Once, twice, a third time. It kept ringing. I let it. 10 minutes later, Mark patched through again, a rare note of tension in his voice. Sir, Ms. Davenport is here. She's in the lobby and she's demanding to see you. Security is holding her per our protocol. Tell her to go home, I said, turning a page, or to make an appointment. She says, it's about the gala last night. She wants to explain, and to compensate you. Compensate. My pen stopped for a second, then continued, signing my name with heavy, deliberate strokes. That won't be necessary, I said. Tell Ms. Davenport that some things, once broken, can't be replaced. Our partnership included. There was a 2-second pause. Understood, sir. I ended the call and flipped my phone face down on the desk, cutting off the outside world. I could picture the scene downstairs. Victoria Davenport, always so poised, so in command, had likely never been barred from entering a building in her life. Her pride, her composure, her absolute certainty that she controlled every situation. Were they starting to crack? Was she angry, stunned, or was she finally realizing that the old piece might have been more than just jewelry? It didn't matter anymore. I took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee. The bitter taste filled my mouth. On my computer screen, a newsfeed was set to auto-refresh. Soon, the headlines would change. Caldwell Davenport engagement off. Merger collapses. Davenport Industries stock plummets on news of Caldwell withdrawal. And beneath the statement I had posted, the comments would be exploding. Speculation, gossip, sympathy, scorn. A digital flood that would wash away the pristine image we had so carefully curated. That was all for Victoria to deal with now. As for me, I put down my coffee cup and looked out at the clear blue sky. The chill in my heart finally seemed to be receding, burned away by the bright morning sun. I just wondered how badly the fire she had started, the one named regret, would burn her and what it would illuminate in the wreckage she had made. I'm not sure when the rain started. Sometime around dusk, a gray mist had swallowed the horizon, and then the soft patter began against the windows, growing steadily into a relentless downpour. By midnight, it was a full-blown tempest with wind driving sheets of rain sideways against the house. The only light in my study was a single reading lamp, casting a warm, isolated glow on my desk. I was reviewing the final risk assessment for an overseas acquisition, a dense document that required my full attention. The storm became a white noise, walling off the rest of the world. Then I heard it, a faint but persistent buzzing from a gate, somehow managing to cut through the howl of the wind. At first, I thought I was imagining it. At this hour, in this weather, no one could get into the Greenwich estate. The security was absolute. No one got past the main gate without an appointment. But the buzzing continued insistent. I frowned and picked up the intercom to the gatehouse. Mr. Caldwell. The head of security's voice crackled through, tinged with static and concern. Sorry to disturb you, sir. It's Ms. Davenport. She's at the front gate, demanding to see you. We told her you weren't accepting visitors, but she refuses to leave. She's been out there for almost an hour. Victoria. I looked toward the window, now just a sheet of black, distorted by the cascading rain. The storm seemed to be getting worse. I see, I said, putting the receiver down without giving an order. The words on the report swam before my eyes. The buzzing at the gate stopped, then started again, this time accompanied by another sound, something torn and desperate that was mostly shredded by the wind. I sat in silence, my fingers drumming a slow, steady rhythm on the polished mahogany of the desk, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Another 10, maybe 20 minutes passed. The security chief called again, his voice now laced with genuine alarm. Sir, Ms. Davenport. She's on her knees, in the mud, outside the gate. This is highly irregular, and we're concerned for her safety. What are your instructions? On her knees. My drumming fingers stopped. The image formed instantly in my mind. The torrential rain, the cold iron of the gate, and the woman who was always so perfectly composed, so unbreakable, now collapsed in the mud. Her expensive clothes would be soaked through, plastered to her skin, her hair matted to her pale face. The rain washing away her makeup, her pride, everything. The proud Victoria Davenport. What for? An apology? An explanation? A last-ditch effort to salvage her crumbling empire? I leaned back in my chair. In the shadows beyond the lamplight, the room felt vast and dark. Finally, I stood and walked to the massive window, pulling back the heavy curtain. Outside was a world drowning in darkness and rain. In the distance, trees thrashed in the wind like tormented spirits. The only light came from 2 small lamps on either side of my front door, their weak yellow glow struggling against the deluge. And there, just at the edge of that light, beyond my manicured lawn, was a small, dark shape, a kneeling figure. The rain hammered down on her so hard I could almost feel the brutal, physical impact of it. She was motionless, as if she'd become a statue of pure misery. A flash of lightning split the sky, and in that stark, momentary whiteness, I saw it all. The shuddering of her body, the way she was clutching something to her chest. I couldn't see what it was. I didn't want to. I stood there for a long time, watching the rain streak down the glass like endless tears. The figure never moved. Eventually, I turned away from the window, walked to the house control panel, and switched on the external intercom. My voice, when I spoke into the empty air of the room, was flat, amplified by the system with a cold, metallic edge that would carry through the storm. Ms. Davenport. The rain outside seemed to pause for a breath. A replica, I said, my gaze fixed on my own indistinct reflection in the dark glass of bookcase. My voice was colder than the rain, each word a block of ice. It suits you. I switched off the intercom and walked back to the window, pushing open the heavy glass. The storm roared into the room, a savage blast of wind and ice-cold water. The curtains flew wildly, papers scattered across my desk, and a lampshade flickered. The raw, wet smell of the night filled the study. At the same instant, from the darkness beyond the gate, the kneeling figure convulsed. A raw, broken shriek, half human, half animal, tore through the storm. Julian! The wind ripped her cry to shreds. I stood before the open window, letting the rain whip against my face and soak the front of my shirt. The figure outside seemed to slump, all energy expended in that one final scream. Her cry devolved into a low, wretched sobbing that was quickly lost in the downpour. I had seen enough. I pulled the window shut, the sound of the storm instantly muffled to a low drone. The chill remained in the air. I walked back to my desk. The risk assessment report was waiting. The world of numbers, logic, and consequence felt grounding, real. I didn't look outside again. Sometime later, a secure email from Mark arrived. The subject was simple: Davenport Industries, market open. I clicked it open. The summary was brief. Sir, Davenport stock hit limit down at the opening bell. Market is rife with speculation, directly linking the crash to our withdrawal and the engagement news. They've halted trading and issued a statement about normal operations, but their primary lending syndicate has already formally requested a risk review. 3 of their largest suppliers are demanding immediate payment. The dominoes are falling. I closed the email. The dominoes, yes. I had simply pushed the first one. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the ice clinking against the crystal. The burn of the liquor was a welcome warmth against the lingering cold. It was time for the next move. I dialed my father's private line. Dad, I saw the news. His voice was even. You were more decisive than I expected. The timing was right. The old man Davenport called me this afternoon. My father continued. Wanted to talk about the kids. I told him it was the kids' business to settle. We old men shouldn't interfere. He had given me his blessing, and with it, the full weight of the consequences. He had closed the final door on Victoria. I understand. That brooch of your mother's. His voice softened for a barest fraction of a second. Maybe it's for the best that it broke. Some things are meant to be memories. Breaking them could be a way of letting go. It was the closest he would ever come to telling me he understood, that he was proud. Yes, I managed to say, my throat tight. Go on then, he said, his tone shifting, becoming sharp and focused. The Caldwells don't start fights, but we damn well finish them. And we don't trade our children's dignity for a fragile peace. After we hung up, I opened another encrypted file on my computer. The title read, Project Newport, Alternate Strategy B. It was a competing venture, one that targeted the core of Davenport's market share, a project we had shelved when the engagement was announced. The freeze was now lifted. As I began to work, I noticed the sky outside was turning a deep, bruised purple. The rain had finally stopped. I stood and stretched, walking back to the window one last time. The drive was empty, glistening under the security lights. The kneeling figure was gone. All that was left was a patch of trampled mud. She had left or been taken away. It made no difference. Just as my eyes were about to turn away, I saw it. A small glint of something in the mud near the base of the gate, right at the edge of the light. Something small and shiny, left behind. I looked for a second, then turned away. I went back to my desk and sat down in the darkness, the blue light of the monitor painting my face. A new game had begun, and the player must always look forward. The storm, and whatever it washed away, was already in the past.